If you read only one book on the roots of this financial meltdown, I recommend this one, Bad Money, Reckless Finance, Failed Politics, and the Global Crisis of American Capitalism. The author, Kevin Phillips, has a history of being way ahead of the curve. As a young man working for Richard Nixon, he wrote The Emerging Republican Majority, a book that uncannily predicted how the GOP would regain power in Washington. Kevin Phillips saw our current crisis coming a long time ago, and in one book of historical insight after another, laid out the clues he was tracking. As recently as last spring, in the American Prospect magazine, Phillips wrote that what he thought was about to happen would be unusual and potentially tragic. In the preface of his book, he has written that these things usually come to fruition in August and September. And sure enough, here we are, coping in September with the effects of bad money. Kevin, it's good to see you again.
Nice to be here.
Is there any consolation in being right when the conditions are so bad?
Well, I guess there is in one narrow little niche, but I do have the feeling that this is going to be a big one. I hate to use the term innings, but let's say I don't think we're too far into the ball game. I think we have more of the ball game to go than we've had. So yes, I think it's going to be a real problem.
In a ball game, there are referees, there are umpires. Who are the referees now? Who are the umpires in this critical game?
Well, in a sense, I think some of the umpires are investors. Some are people overseas who wonder what they have to think of the United States. Do they want to keep investing here? Do they want to support the dollar? Do they believe in the government here and knows what it's doing? But Americans, ordinary Americans, don't have much of a role in this. Partly, I think, because they don't really know the dimensions of what's involved here. This is the denouement of a 25-year debt buildup, which was undertaken mostly by the financial sector, putting themselves on steroids to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And we finally gotten to the point where the bubble isn't sustainable anymore, but a lot of Wall Street is dedicated to minimizing the spattering of the bubble, so to speak.
Give me a quick definition of bad money.
Well, bad money has a triple connotation. The first is bad money in the sense of bad capitalism drives out good capitalism.
That's sort of a historical rule.
That's right. We've had...
I don't understand why it is, but...
Well, because you have to compete with sleaze. You get a little more sleaze in your own operations. And you look at all these lies, these deceptions, these frauds that have been going on. But I mean, there aren't too many people that would say back 2 or 3 years ago that the way to prosper more was to do less of it. You had to do what the others were doing, and that's the way these things, it was true in the 20s, it's been true in plenty of other bubbles. You have to do it. So just the question of what's been bubbling here and the hugeness of the problem hasn't been revealed to people.
You say it's the greatest story never told.
Well, the greatest story never told in several senses. The first sense, and when I do bad money, it's bad capitalism, bad money in the sense of the dollar, and bad money in the sense of bad dog, bad Wall Street. But what's here that doesn't get the attention is the United States in the last 20 years undertook an enormous transformation of itself with no attention paid. And what it means is, and what makes all this so frightening, is the country is at risk because of the size of a financial sector that has never been graded on its competence and behavior in any serious way. They are the economy at this point, and we are now seeing what happens when a 20 to 21% of GDP financial sector starts to come unglued.
But there are people, Kevin, who disagree with us, who say that this financial industry has created great wealth for America in the last 25 years.
Oh, it's created great wealth for a small slice of America, but if you go back and we remember the manufacturing heyday, the auto workers in Michigan had fishing cabins up on the lake, and the middle class had been fattened by the rise of the blue-collar middle class. Well, there's no rising blue-collar middle class now. The middle class is shrinking. The pie in a financial economy goes to the 1 or 2% or even less that have capital, skills, and education. We have never had so much polarization and wealth disparity and just groaning wealth right at the top of the ladder as we have now under finance.
So how is it that, as you write in the book, the financial sector has hijacked the American economy? You use that term.
I'll use the term, and without using a whole bunch of numbers, let me try to put it this way.
The numbers are there in Chapter 2.
The numbers are there in Chapter 2. You had essentially a financial sector that, let's say, was sort of neck and neck with manufacturing back in the late 1980s. But they got control in a lot of ways of the agenda. Finance has been bailed out. I mean, everybody thinks this is horrible now, what we're seeing in terms of bailouts. Even a lot of the people who do it think it's bad. This has been going on since the beginning of the 1980s. Finance has been preferred as the sector that got government support. Manufacturing slides, nobody helps. Finance has a problem. Federal Reserve to the rescue, Treasury to the rescue, subsidies, this, that, and the other. So bit by bit, they got bigger. And the other reason they got bigger was because this became a country that was further and further in debt. Consumerism was just pushed to the nth degree. People were given the sense that they had to buy everything and they had to borrow to do it increasingly. But we've seen the central component of the rise of the financial sector is the rise of a debt industry. Mortgage, credit cards, all these gimmicks that Wall Street sells, just all kinds of products. And of course, the products are laying an egg all over the world right now.
You're very hard in here on Alan Greenspan's tenure at the Fed.
Well, I know Alan from the Republican campaign back in 1968. And he was always a very scholarly, data-driven guy. But I think for some reason or other, his chairmanship will be remembered as turn on the spigots.
Turn on the spigots.
Turn on the spigots. He started in 1987 with that crash that was a wicked one in one day in 1987. And they turned on the spigots. And they had the huge growth of the tech bubble in the 1990s. And then right after the tech and the stock market bubble blew up in 2000, you had 9/11, so there was a need for more stimulus, and they ginned up the stimulus again, hugely. And the upshot is that during Greenspan's tenure from 1987 to 2006, what they call total credit market debt in the United States quadrupled from about 11 trillion up to 44, 45, 46 trillion. And finance got the great bulk of it. And Greenspan would do nothing to disturb finance. He wouldn't puncture a bubble. He wouldn't crack down on the exotic mortgages. He really wouldn't do much of anything except give obscure speeches in which, he mumbled in a different direction so nobody would know what he meant. But basically, he gave finance what they wanted.
And you're right also that during this period, the Clinton administration aided and abetted this kind of speculation.
It's been a bipartisan phenomenon. You can go back to the 1980s and say Reagan and George Bush Sr. got a bubble started. Clinton got in, then got an even bigger bubble going, and then George W. Bush with the biggest bubble of all. But it's not that the Clintonites didn't play. They did. Bob Rubin, as Secretary of the Treasury, if he was a Hindu and he was being reincarnated, he'd come back as a pale because this guy bailed out everything you can imagine. They had the Mexican loan bailout. They had the long-term capital management bailout, the Russian Southeast Asian currency bailouts.
All of which, however, kept them from coming into this economy, into our economy, coming to our continent.
Well, except that a lot of the liquidity they created and the momentum and the borrowed money produced the implosion of the bubble in 2000. And a lot of what was imploding was the $2.5 trillion in new debt that was tied to energy and telecommunications. That's Enron, WorldCom, and Global Crossing. So there was a lot more of a bubble blown up there. Rubin was also central. Democrats more than Republicans in a lot of ways, was the Clinton administration, in getting rid of Glass-Steagall, which was the old restriction